All right, there we go. I think we're live. All right, everybody, happy afternoon. Happy Tuesday. Good afternoon. I'm really glad that you're here. Before we jump into our content today as part of our fundraising breakthrough mini course, if you can hear me and see me okay, would you just type in and leave me a comment that all is well? I don't want to jump too far in before I know for sure that the tech is working. So if you don't mind, just leave me a comment and then I'll know that the audio is working, the video is working, my hair's not sticking up or doing anything weird, and we're good to go. Let's jump in. It is day 2 of our fundraising breakthrough mini course, and that's what you're here for, right? If you were here yesterday, we talked a little bit about building your donor base and how important that is, and being able to find your ideal donor through using an ideal donor profile. That when you get really clear about who you're looking for, it's so much easier to go out and find people in the community who match that profile. And you build that profile based on your best donors right now. So we do have a whole set of handouts. You should be able to scroll up or scroll down in the group here and find those. But look, so we had a fill in the blank page, and then this is the one that you want. This is the ideal donor profile worksheet where you can start to think about what your best donors have in common. Fill that out. You're looking for trends. You're looking for what your best donors have in common so that you know how to go find more of those people out in the community. All right, so that's step 1 to good fundraising, is you need to know who you're looking for out in the community. Okay, now once you know who you're looking for, then we got to make sure that you've got some good messaging. Messaging is key. If you approach your absolute best, most perfect, ideal donor prospects, but you say something really boring, you're not going to get a donation. They're not going to give. They're not going to respond. So we have to have something that's compelling. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So we're going to be using pages 3 and 4. All right, so it looks like that. And I want you to look at this picture right here. What is that? Does anybody recognize that restaurant? If you just said Cheesecake Factory, you are right. Do you know that you can go in any cheesecake factory in the country, and I have been into a lot of them. It used to be my absolute favorite restaurant, and now I have developed a dairy intolerance, so it's hard to go in there knowing I can't eat that cheesecake anymore. But I love Cheesecake Factory. You can go into anywhere in the country, and almost immediately when you walk in the door, there's that case. And it is full of the most delicious looking cheesecake you have ever seen in your life. And they get you with that right up front. You know why? Because that's what they want you to buy. They want you to buy cheesecake, and they put it right in the front door, so you're going to see it the minute that you walk in, and you're going to go over and stand and look at it while you're waiting for your table to be ready. And the only thing that will tear you away from that case is when they say, we're ready to seat you now, right? They do that because it works. It's delicious. It grabs your attention right from the get-go, and they hand you that big old notebook of a menu, and while you're thinking about your meal, you're also thinking about what kind of cheesecake you want. If they didn't lead with that cheesecake, what would happen? I mean, first of all, that's their brand. It's Cheesecake Factory, right? But if they waited until like the very end, like a lot of restaurants do, and they come around with a little tray, and that wouldn't work for them because they have like a jillion different kinds of cheesecakes. But you get the point that they don't push that to the back. They lead with something delicious. Now, I want you to also notice that nowhere do they talk about how they make the cheesecake. You know why? Because we don't care. We don't care what ingredients they use. We don't care how long it takes them to make it. We just want to know, do you have my favorite kind today? Do you have any of the white chocolate, raspberry, truffle cheesecake today? You have some really amazing flavors. Now, we need to take a lesson from that. We're going to take a little lesson that when we talk about our nonprofit, we don't want to talk about how we do things. Just like Cheesecake Factory does not talk to you about how they make the cheesecake because we don't really care. We got to stop talking about how we run our programs and how we do what we do, and instead we got to talk about the end result. And in their case, the end result is that delicious looking cheesecake right there. So what is your end result? And that's what you're going to lead with. So you can go right on the handout. The key to good messaging is to lead with something delicious. And yes, your nonprofit does work that is delicious. You just may not recognize it. You may not be able to see it. Sometimes it's really hard to see the forest for the trees. You know what I'm talking about? Sometimes we are so deep into the organization and we know everything there is to know. We know it frontwards and backwards and sideways and upside down and 6 ways to Sunday. We know everything there is to know about our organization. And the problem is we want to share all of that. If you're meeting a donor prospect for the first time, whether that's them finding your Facebook page for the first time, that's an introduction, or they're finding your website for the first time, that's an introduction, or there's something else that's happening, we want to make sure that the messaging is spot on. If you happen to be going out and speaking to a group, which probably isn't happening right now because thank you, COVID-19, but when you get the chance to go do speaking gigs again, you want to make sure your messaging is delicious and that it's on point and that you're talking about why you do what you do because of changing lives, and you talk about the result and the impact of what you do, not the how. We want to talk about the why, not the how. We do the work that we do because we want to make a difference in the world, right? So you want to talk more about that. Okay, there's 2 or 3 things that get in the way of good messaging. So grab your handout. There's some fill in the blank parts here. If you got a pen, we're going to go through these and I want you to write this down. Okay, the first thing that gets in the way of you being able to deliver a delicious message is self-centeredness. Now, again, when you live and breathe your organization, you know everything there is to know. Your tendency is going to say, well, we do this and we do that and we. It's like some kind of crazy fundraising French. And it's very self-centered. So what you want to avoid is the self-centeredness. You can't talk about we because really your donors don't care. It's just like if you go into Cheesecake Factory, do you really care how they choose their vendors? Do you care what the hiring process is? Do you care how credentialed their staff is? Do you care how many awards they've won? No. You just want to know that they're still making delicious cheesecake. That's what you want to know. That's what you're there for. You're there for a good time and a good meal, and that's all you care about. Remember that donors they think very similarly when it comes to nonprofit. They want to know that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. They want to know that you're making the difference in the world that your organization is here to make. So we have to let go of the self-centeredness. That means you have to stop using the pronouns we, us, and our. And what you want to do instead is use you, your, and yours. So you versus we and us. You gotta make the donor the hero anytime that you're writing anything. It doesn't matter if we're talking about language for your website or a social media post or a thank you letter or an appeal. It just doesn't matter. Whatever you're writing needs to be focused on the donor, not on you. So that's the first obstacle. The next one comes from my brilliant friend, Beth Brodowski. And Beth says, people don't want to fund your existence. They want to fund your impact. So in your handouts, you can write existence versus impact. And what does that mean? That means, you know how a lot of organizations will do campaigns where they'll say, hey, help us raise $10,000 for our annual fund. That's such a mistake because number one, most people outside of fundraising have no idea what an annual fund is. If you don't have any idea what an annual fund is, perfect. Do not start using that. The other problem is when you're asking people to help you raise money toward an arbitrary goal, that doesn't mean anything to the donor either. So instead of asking people to give money so that you can keep the doors open, you can keep the lights on, you can keep delivering programs, talk about how you're changing lives and how their donation will make a difference. So here's where you want to be able to say your donation of fill in the blank will provide this service or that sort of thing. More on that in just a second. This is important and makes a huge difference. All right, the last one that way too many people fall into is what we call jargon breath. Jargon breath. And what that means is using the slang, the inside language, the acronyms, all that stuff that people outside your organization don't have any clue about. You know what it is, so you use that language every day. And it's easy to let that stuff slip into your writing when you're writing a blog post or a social media post or a press release or whatever you're writing. It doesn't matter. We got to keep that stuff out because jargon makes people feel stupid. Most people will not know what your industry slang is or your acronyms, and they'll just kind of tune out, and before long you've lost them, right? So if you work in animal welfare, you got to be really careful about talking about things like TNR and S/N and things like that, because those of you in animal welfare just went, okay, I know what that is. Everybody else went, what? I don't know what you're talking about. And that's exactly it. So you got to be really careful about language like underserved population, or if you work in the food bank world, you know what a food desert is. A lot of people don't know what a food desert is. We just got to be really, really careful about the slang. You want to use words that you might use in everyday conversation with a friend. As a matter of fact, here's one of the exercises that I like. We call this the kitchen table exercise. Imagine that you're sitting at your kitchen table with a friend. What would you say? How would you explain what you're trying to write? And don't use any of the acronyms or any of the jargon or crap. That's how you want to write. You want to make it very conversational, very easy to understand. And some of you may be thinking, well, wait a minute. Really? We want to dumb it down that much? Well, I don't consider it dumbing down. I consider it making it very easy to consume. Very easy. You see, here's the deal. People are incredibly busy these days, right? Even though a lot of people are staying at home, we're distracted. We've got a lot on our mind. People do not want to work hard to understand what you've written. They will not burn calories to try to understand your message. You can write that one down. People do not want to burn calories to understand your message. In other words, don't make them work too hard to try to figure out what you're trying to say. So we got to keep it very simple. The simpler message is going to win every time. The end. The end. I mean, think about Nike. What's Nike's slogan? Just do it, right? Think about if Nike had some slogan that was like, soldier on, or something like, put your best attempt first, or something like that. We'd all be going like, what? Because they used very simple conversational language that we can all understand. Just do it. We get that. We get that. We understand it. It works. So you need to do the same thing in all your messaging. Whether you're writing a thank you letter or an appeal, a social media post, a blog post, whatever you're writing, your message has to be easy to understand. Conversational is best. No jargon, no slang, no self-centeredness. Okay, keep it really easy. Trust me on this. Okay, now I want to go to page 4 because I want to show you a tool that you can use that's going to help you keep your message focused where it needs to be, especially when you're asking. And this is a technique that I call core number. Your core number is an expression of what it costs you to deliver a unit of service. So what's a unit of service? So a unit of service, if you look at your organization and what you do, it's the smallest piece of what you do. So you break down everything into the smallest piece. So let me use an animal shelter as an example. So if you have a shelter and you're taking care of dogs and cats and all different kinds of animals, and they come in, we have all different kinds of issues, and you say, well, a dog normally stays with us, or a dog or a cat normally stays with us 3 weeks, and then they get adopted or they move on to a rescue or whatever. So 3 weeks, and if we break that down even further, we could say a day's worth of care. So that might be our smallest unit of service. Now, literally, we could break it down into an hour or a minute or a second if we want to, but I think for our purposes, a day is going to work. So a day of care at your shelter for a homeless dog or cat, that's a unit of service. If you work with a food bank or a food pantry, then one emergency food box could be your unit of service. Or if you're used to breaking things down into meals, it could be one meal for one person. That's a really good way to do it. Now, the other thing about a good unit of service is that your reader or your donor is going to be able to understand it fast. When you say 1 day and night of care for a homeless dog or cat, they're going to go, okay. Now, they may not understand homeless dog or cat. That might be a little jargony, but they're going to get that. So one emergency food box for a family in need, people are going to nod their head. 1 meal and 1 night of stay at a homeless shelter or a domestic violence shelter, 1 hour of tutoring after school for a child in your program. Okay, you getting this? Now, it can be a little hard sometimes to figure this out, especially if you have a lot of different programs and they're kind of all over the place. This can be a little difficult. All right, so just work on that, and we're going to find a way to make that super simple for you. Okay. Now, what I want you to do then is follow this worksheet, and it's going to help you do the math. Sorry, I should have warned you that we're doing math this afternoon. This will help you do the math to calculate what your core number is. So once you figure out your unit of service, you're going to look back at last year and get all your expenses and your total units of service. You're going to divide it out. And you'll see on the handout that we've got a sample core number for an animal shelter. And it comes out on the example to be $4.52 per day to provide care for a dog or cat in need. That's a very easy ask. So then if you use that and you turn around and you're asking people to give and you say your donation of $4.52 will provide a day's worth of care, now you're putting the emphasis on the end result where it needs to be. You're asking people to make a difference. You're not asking them to fund your overhead. Now, here's the interesting thing. When you're calculating this, you're going to use all your expenses, not just the direct expenses. And what that means is all your overhead is going to be calculated in there. So you don't have to worry about, well, we only raised enough money for food and veterinary, and now we got to figure out how are we paying for insurance on the building and the utilities and everything else. Okay, so we're going to keep that focused on that core number, and it makes a huge difference. Okay, let's do some Q&A. Let me see what your questions are. All right, I'm going to have to get on my phone because I still can't see questions. I am so hamstrung by the technology today. Okay, all right, hang on. Okay, Eric is asking about a link for the day one. You should be able to scroll down in the Fundraising for Founders group and find the video from yesterday because we just left it right there. Okay, Melissa's asking a great question. So Melissa's nonprofit works for legislation to benefit protection of the fish population. What is 1 unit in that case? Okay, so benefit the fish population. So my questions, Melissa, to you would be, in what geographic area, and is there a way to maybe calculate like a square mile of water, or is it a number of fish? Is it a number of breeds of fish? So is there a way to provide like a day's protection for a specific kind of fish or a week's protection? I think we'd almost have to jump on and talk about that one to figure that out. So working for legislation to benefit protection of the fish. So it's not about the legislation. It absolutely is about the fish. So I think you've got to look at species or maybe an area, geographic area that you're serving where the protection is actually happening. Victoria, thank you. Some days I have the dogs here and some I don't, and she's particularly barky. All right, let's see. Daryl, we help people in need based on their need, ranging from $100 to $10,000. How would we figure out our core number? Okay, so my question to you, Daryl, is what does that look like when you're helping people in need? Does that mean that you're helping them pay their rent? Does that mean that you are providing counseling? What does that look like really? So you're going to have to, and I don't know what's going on with my nose. Sorry, you guys, it's itching. I think it's going to depend, Daryl, on what kind of help you're doing, and what that help is making possible. So if you're providing them with a range of services that are preventing them from losing their house or going hungry or something like that, then that's what you want to focus on, is what you're making possible. You're providing the service so that those people can continue to do what? Don't know. Okay, so without knowing more about that, that's really hard for me to say exactly what that core number would be, but that's the path that I'd want you to go down, is really start thinking about what that help that you're providing makes possible. Okay, Melissa is about striped bass population and Manhattan, okay, on the East Coast. Melissa, you might also think about what would happen to the environment if those populations went away. What would happen? That might be another way to start thinking about the impact of the work that you're doing. So, you know, the obvious is if you're protecting those species of fish, why does that matter? And what gets to happen when those fish get protected? Okay, perfect. Daryl says he pays rent and does grocery gift cards. Okay, perfect. Karen, that's so funny. Itchy nose, expect a visitor. Yes, my husband just walked in, and that was one of the reasons why my dogs were barking. Because it's real life here, raw and authentic. Okay, so back to Daryl, paying rent and grocery gift cards. So basically, you are keeping people with like basic needs. So making sure that they have a place to stay and they have food. What you might do, I would be really curious to look at your numbers in terms of keeping a family in their home for a day or a week, and then being able to calculate that to see how much does that cost really. So if you're giving somebody enough money for them to pay their rent, well, then that's 30 days of keeping them away from homelessness. And then you can talk about the impact on a family when they do lose their home and how that impacts the community. Because you know, the interesting thing is when people are struggling for food or they're homeless, it actually costs the community money because the community winds up paying for some services or has to deal with some issues that arise out of that. So you could think about that and maybe talk about that some too. All right, Debbie, our nonprofit raises funds to research in triple negative and metaplastic breast cancer. How would we figure out our core number? What comes in goes out. Okay. So yours, Debbie, might be a day's worth of research or an hour of research. So I'd be really curious to see when researchers are doing their thing, how many hours a day are they working? Because the interesting thing for this, and I've actually done this with some other organizations, is when you think about what can happen in an hour. So a cure can be found in an hour, an advancement can be made in a day, and you can start thinking about it that way. So yours could be your gift of X provides the possibility or pays for a day's worth of research or an hour's worth of research, providing the possibility of a cure in that hour. And I would think that people would get excited about that. Beth Ann cares for medically fragile children. We are using the cost of nurse care, $44 for an hour of care for a medically fragile child. That works. Now, here's the thing. If your core number is really small, and I think on the worksheet it says if it's $20 or less, that's great. That's going to be an easy number to use that people are going to get excited about. The lower the number, the easier, yes, it is. So when your number is more like Beth's, where it's $44, or gosh, I've even had them where it was as much as $150, all you have to do there is be ready to explain why it costs that. So in Beth Ann's case, $44 an hour for care for a medically fragile child. I'm going to imagine that caring for a medically fragile child takes a special kind of training or a special kind of care. So it can't just be anybody who you couldn't just hire anybody to come in and help take care of that child. They've got to have some real specific training. And there may be some real specific kinds of things that they need to do while they're caring for that child. So when you start to explain some of that, people are going to nod their head and they're going to get it. All right, so Linda's asking a good question. Is Daryl's unit then not $100 and multiple thereof if that's the amounts they give? No, your core number is not about the amount that they give. It's the unit of service, and I think in a situation like Daryl's, it's more about the help. It's about I would guess for Daryl, I would be wanting to play with a day's worth of help, and whether that's a day that where the rent is covered or a day that the food is covered or a day of something else. That's a day that family does not have to worry about that. So when they provide 30 days of rent help, that gives that family a chance to breathe for a minute. And Food is going to be different. A full month worth of rent or a half month of rent, like that, those could all be different. So it's not necessarily just $100 and then multiples thereof. It's about looking at, on average, what does that day of care cost? And then you're going to be factoring in all those different kinds of. Okay, so, and Daryl's saying providing small grants to those in need, but the needs vary. So I think, Daryl, that I think you could, again, still look at it's a day's worth of support or care and average that all out, because there's probably a lot of, even if there's a lot of different things that you do, I think you can still find a way to express that core number. One of the things that I find with core number when people are trying to understand it is a lot of times easy to get into the weeds and say, but if I'm helping cats and I'm also helping dogs, that's different. And the truth is, if you back up, they're both animals, and that's where the commonality comes in. And that's why I think even if you're helping with rent, you're helping with food, you're helping with some other things, it's still providing that family that peace of mind that they need to get through another day so that they can start thinking about what they're going to do tomorrow. It just gives them a chance to take a breath for today and just be a family for today. So maybe what you're really providing is that peace of mind for a day. Maybe that's really what this is all about. Okay, Browning. Hi, Browning. If you have 3 programs at our Literacy Council, should we divide them up or figure a core number for the whole program? I would actually do both. I would do a core number for the whole Literacy Council, because ultimately your goal is teaching people to read, and I would probably look at per hour if you can do that. But there are going to be times when you're going to either be writing a grant for a specific program or talking about a specific program, and it's going to be handy to have the number of what it costs you for that specific program as well. So I would actually do both in that case. But in general, you want to use the core number for your whole program. All right, Lynn. Lynn says, our foundation raises money for special projects for a state-run facility. The foundation has no programs. We don't raise operating money for the facility, but special equipment or other things out of the regular state budget. How do I work this? Okay. Special equipment or other things outside the budget. I would have a look at, Lynn, I think I would make a list of all the different kinds of things that you provide for that facility, equipment, and whatever else, and then look and see what they have in common, knowing that those are the extras that make the facility top-notch. Those are the little extra pieces that the facility needs but are outside of their budget. Those are the pieces that make it worth staying in that facility. You make sure that they have what they need. So you're offering people the chance to help you do that. I'd be really curious what the other things outside of special equipment are, but if it is special equipment, let's say it's, okay, this is going to be kind of silly, but it'll work. So let's say that you're buying an ice cream machine, and the ice cream machine is $1,000, but you have all kinds of residents who are going to get to use that ice cream machine, and we think it has a shelf life of 5 years. We can actually calculate then how many people per day that machine is going to be able to serve, you see? And then you can ask people if they want to help you get this ice cream machine in that facility. It is however many dollars per person per day to be able to purchase that machine and put it in. So you can look at it that way. I saw an animal group do this one time with a spay-neuter clinic. They were asking for money for surgical kits, and that's the instruments and things they actually use to do the surgeries. And they were talking about how many animals they do per day and what they expected the lifetime use of that equipment was going to be. So they basically said, the grant was, if you can pay this much money for the equipment, we're going to be able to provide spay and neuter for this many thousand animals. So on average, it's this much per surgery. And that's going to prevent this many animals down the road because these animals will no longer be able to breed. It was a beautiful explanation. And I think a lot of times we forget about that. We forget that with a piece of equipment, we can talk about what's the lifetime usage of that equipment, and then be able to help the donor understand that their donation is not going to just help today, but That's an investment in that equipment that's going to last for a long time. Okay. Sherry is asking a great question. As a new startup that actually hasn't opened our doors yet, how do I calculate my core number when I don't have real numbers from a prior year's service? Great question. And the answer is you're going to estimate. So you're going to think about how many units of service do you want to provide in the coming 12 months and how much do you think that's going to cost? So what that means is you got to think about programs you want to deliver, how many people are going to be in your programs or animals. You got to think about what you think the cost is going to be. So you have to kind of map out a budget for the year, revenue and expenses, and then think about what are you anticipating that you'll deliver with those programs. And that's how you're going to be able to calculate that you and you can even say, we estimate that it will cost $6.20 per day to do fill in the blank or whatever that is. And you can use that number until you get a year's worth of experience under your belt so that you can do that actual calculation. And that's how you're going to do that, is you're going to estimate and tell people what you think that it'll be. Karen, yeah, weighing in on Daryl. Can he break it down like a shopping list? $40 per day provides a meal, shelter, peace of mind. Yep. Karen, I think, Karen, that's a good idea. The one thing that I think is sometimes it can be a little more difficult when it's, and there's an organization in my county that does this. So if you can go in there and get help with your utility bill or your rent, you can get an emergency food box, and then I think they can actually help you with like a voucher to get your dog spayed or neutered, and there's like 3 or 4 other things. So when it's so diverse like that, it can be a little difficult to put a value on it. But I think what you have to do is you have to find the commonality. What do all those things have in common? It's all assistance for a family that otherwise couldn't afford it. And then you start just adding up all the numbers and breaking it down so that you can calculate that core number. Yeah. Lynn, I would probably do something similar with a medical equipment, forklift, building materials for a hothouse. That's awesome. You may have to look at the different kinds of things that your organization has done and just look at it over the last year or two and see what you've got. And I think that'll be helpful for you. All right. I don't want to keep you guys too long. We've covered a lot of stuff. We've talked a lot about core number today. So here's what I want you to do. If you haven't already, I want you to take this worksheet and go have a whack at this and see if you can crunch your core number. And then certainly we can talk more about this tomorrow. Oh, Marilyn. Yes, Marilyn, you're on the right track. Yep. So Marilyn, you got your core number on production of what you're trying to do, then calculate another core number on establishing the facility. So if you can get into a center and you know that you're going to be able to be in that center for 10 years, 20 years, whatever, and how many people will be employed there, how many of those kits you'll be able to crank out and multiply that out. So if you're asking people to help you come up with the money for that center, that's how you want to go about that. All right, you guys, I'm going to go ahead and wind us up. You've been very patient. So be back here tomorrow. We're going to be talking tomorrow about how to balance things. If you've ever wondered, how often can you ask somebody for a donation before they just stop giving? We're going to talk about that tomorrow. We're going to talk about building relationships and asking and having the right balance of non-asks and asks, and I think you're not going to want to miss it. So come on back tomorrow. We'll be here in the group. If you think of something you want to ask in the meantime, just ask away. I'll be looking at the questions and comments a little bit later. All right, that is it for today, you guys. I'll see you next time. Bye.